Welcome back to Heaven's Vault. We're doing a deep dive, episode 21, and we're taking some folks over to Renaki. After a very long time of ignoring Renaki because we didn't really have enough stuff to do there, we're headed over there proper now. It's quite a ways. I could have waited until we got there before starting the stream, but I wanted to talk a little bit about the mechanisms of how the game works. Oh, shoot. Oh, good, made it. And how the games could work in the future. Because the point of this is that this is a new, I don't want to say genre, a new approach to how to do storytelling, how to do this kind of dialogue trees and stuff. And there's a lot of things to think about. For example, it works pretty well as a discovery game where you're trying to uncover information, and that's the point of the game. But it could also work pretty well as a different kind of game, which isn't about discovery, but is instead about proceeding down the plot as you see fit. Things unlocking as you move forward, meeting new people, and watching their plot lines unfold. In the case of both of these, the question is, how do you actually write the dialogue? How do you actually write the adventures? And that is a hard thing to answer. What they did with this game is they just spent a lot of time doing it. They went in and they created so many complicated setups, and they just debugged it and debugged it and debugged it, and it's still not perfect. They've gone through and released dozens of patches, each of which was just focused on letting you get out of a wedged story. And I think that that's just because it's a new approach. I don't think that's a fundamental problem with context-driven games. I think it's just that we don't yet understand how to help people write them. So when I'm thinking about how to write these things, there are a couple of things to consider. If we think about it in terms of a context, then we can write a context, and a context would be, for example, learning about the backstory of a character and then solving their personal problems. For example, let's go ahead and say it's a Mass Effect game, and we're writing Tali. Well, Tali's context is that she's on a quest to try and aid her fleet. And she's surrounded by other contexts, like the context of her fleet and the context of her of the robots, the Geth, and also the context of things like Saren. She just accidentally wandered into Saren's plotline. So even if we write Tali's story, Tali's personal context, it's tightly bound up with the other contexts, and it can proceed in a lot of complicated ways. If we are not, forced down the same road, not forced down the best path, we're still going to be forced down the context. We're still going to be have to uncover who she is, what she likes, what she needs to do, what she doesn't care about. These are all things that
the Renaki Reach is famous for smashing boats to splinters.
These are all things.
The Renakans are said to make their boats from solid iron. I could see Yazi had been on a ship before. He kept his balance with ease. It occurred to me then that he could probably sail.
So, because it's still a progression, there's still like an ideal thing that we want. We still want Tali's story to be told in a specific way, such that the player feels all the things we want them to feel. And we can have divergent paths, like, are you dating Tali or not? Are you best friends with Tali, or are you merely working with her? That sort of complicated stuff, right? But each of those paths is a simple context path. It's not it's not necessarily something that has to emerge from some complicated theoretical generative algorithm. They're just 3 or 4 different story paths, and we write them the same way that we would normally write them. But we write them with an eye towards how they unfold openly, and how the rest of our contexts interact. And that's the part where a tool really starts to come in handy. there are a lot of things that we can do to forward Tally's story, and it's going to depend on where we are, what we need. Sometimes we can forward her story with one of 3 or 4 different events. Sometimes there are 3 or 4 different events we're going to need before her story gets forwarded. And in all of these cases, there are also going to be situations where her story can be forwarded via a randomly generated element that happens to have that context element in it. For example, if she needs to uncover a geth and hack it before she can move on to the next part of her context, well, we can run into a geth wherever we want. So we can just have that happen. And that's similar to what we have with this game, where it's set up so that you have a different... you can have a whole bunch of contexts that fire depending on where you are. There's different preconditions that happen depending on where you are. It changes what fires, except for it's backwards. Instead of... I missed a rec. Okay, that's fine. So instead of saying, well, we'll find a geth if we've been here, we would say things like... we can find a geth in any of these locations. We'll add in the geth story beat, and manually it'll just algorithmically plop all of the characters at where they need to be, saying what they need to say, and the background will be different, but all of the elements are the same. And these are the sorts of things where it really helps to have a tool to help you figure all of this out, a tool to help you map it and test it. And that's really the sort of thing I'm thinking of now, and it's what I'm kind of working on in the background while I'm doing this deep dive. Just a simple little JavaScript toy to help show how this can work. But here we are at Renaki. That was 6 minutes of me talking about the algorithms and the way I see that they might work in the future. But let's switch over to talking about Renaki, a market moon. Looks exactly the same as Elbereth, probably because there are only so many assets that you want to build. A little bit cleaner than Elbereth. Elbereth is pretty dingy. So we're going to try and see whether or not these folks can live a life here. It's a complicated... It's a complicated situation for them, and we're not going to be able to help them very much because it's just not written into the story that we're very helpful. In fact, most of the time we're written into the story as screwing things up. So there are some small mysteries as to who we are and that sort of stuff. It's unimportant whether or not we ever find out who we actually are. It could be made important according to the story, but the story isn't built that way. It doesn't make any sense to us. It's not going to fit into the correct story beats if we suddenly cared about who we were.
Into a bustling street. Hawkers shouted each other down about their wares.
We don't have a family because that makes us the best cipher for telling this story. It's sort of like in the new Star Wars movies, how Rey doesn't have a family worth mentioning, and that's kind of the whole point of her character. It's the same with us. We don't have a family because it would interfere with our ability to tell the story. If who we were mattered, then it would have started mattering long before this. Can we go through some doors? See, you can see that there are people being animated walking back there. but I don't think we're going to be allowed through. Nope. So this is an unusually densely decorated moon in terms of how much level there is, because they even put in like more space that we can't reach, which is fun and interesting. And that's a sign that this is a more interesting moon than some of the other ones we've been to. I like these little gardens; those are cute. I don't believe that we have any money. So let's see what we've got. We can give that scratched silver amulet or the heavily scratched golden model. Unfortunately, we can't go back, so we're actually running out of toys. Let's go ahead and offer up the scratched silver amulet. We're shocked. We're shocked because that's what we were buying. Yeah, Iox, it isn't that Iox doesn't trade, it's that Iox robs people. I mean, it's very, very clear from how they're set up that they're basically... they protect you in much the same way that the Mafia does. Was there... No, it was just someone's sleeve. So, I'm not sure how far we'll be able to get before the episode ends. We'll see. Well, blowing glass is something you can do locally as long as you've got sand, good sand for it locally. Or more accurately, the blowing of the glass and the making of the glass are two different things, so you could get good glass imported and then blow it. But the chances of this place having good glass is relatively, good sand for glass is relatively low. Oh, wait, was there... No? Okay. Can I go in here? Nope. Door is open, but it's not of interest to me, so we're not allowed to go in. That's a cute way to do it, to put in a door that's just open enough to make it clear that that's nothing interesting to you. If it was open any more, we'd think that that was a place we could go in, and if it was open any less, we'd think we would try to open it ourselves. All I know is that now that we're here, we want to try...
The market of Renaki seemed to never end. Shoemakers sold boots to the fruit sellers, who sold sour apples to the knife makers, whose blades the shoemakers used to make boots. I don't know if anyone on Renaki ever slept, but if they did, I bet they bought and sold their dreams.
I didn't realize it's not called Renaki, it's called Renaka. So I'll see if I can pronounce that. Anyway, I forgot what I was saying. It doesn't really matter. I was just making conversation. Oh, a barter economy. Well, welcome to Bartertown. We don't need another hero. Even the robot knows that Iox is bad news.
A fountain was messing about in the middle of the square, spitting at passers-by.
Take a look at me. Do I look like I bathe? So we're talking about how these are all the same book. This is interesting because they're bound in different covers and they're different sizes. Oh, I'm not sure I want to... We'll bite the bullet, mention Iox, see what happens. Okay, so this lady actually doesn't hate Iox because she likes books, and Iox has some. Mm-hmm. So this lady thinks that just being out on the nebula damages your soul. So out here this far from Iox, we're finding some different religions, and concepts of the flow, or the loop rather, are much more aggressive out here than they were on Iox, although on Iox the librarian did believe it. Oh, now she thinks that... It's rare that we get a conversation like this in this game when we're playing like we're playing. Now can we ask her about Amadou? Why did she suddenly bring that up? Well, that's fine. Apparently the context engine gave up and said, like, you're trying to find Amadou, but we didn't give you a chance to ask, so we'll just give it to you straight. That's fine. Those are sandals. Well, that's fine, too. Or it might be the fact that all of the other people around here are keeping an eye on each other's stalls.
I could smell fried meat, spiced apple, fresh leather, wealth.
That sounds a little strange coming from someone who lives on Iox most of the time. bread in this universe is very easy to make because an 8-year-old boy made it out of nothing back on that temple moon. Anyway, that's 20 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and stop and then start up again right here.